Here's what Donald Trump was doing over the weekend. Again, I wonder if he'll be asked about this. Pushing false claims, threatening anyone who does not support him. In a post on Saturday, the former president warned he would try to imprison anyone who engages in, quote, unscrupulous behavior during this year's race.
Oh, and
what does he mean by that?
Of course, people that aren't supporting him.
Right.
Political operatives, lawyers, donors. Yeah.
Yesterday, he continued to amplify false information about the 2020 election by referencing an outlandish claim from the far right that 20% of Pennsylvania's mail-in ballots were fraudulent.
Yes, Donald Trump is at it again, and we'll have more on that after this. Make sure to hit that like button for the latest videos on the election and our latest ads and so forth. And hit that subscribe button. We could use your support, and ring-a-ling the ding-a-ling bell so you get the latest notifications on all our videos. Yes, it is debate day, and today we're going to list some questions we think Donald Trump should be asked in the debate. But if you're watching this after the debate, please keep watching, because these questions are just as important for upcoming interviews, future debates, etc. And we're going to start off, I think, let's see where we're going to start off here. We're going to start off with a question about the election. Let's watch this video to prepare us for it first.
See, and this is the thing. People go, oh, I don't know what to believe because Donald Trump says this, but then I turned on this cable news channel that's lying for 24 hours a day on the right, and they tell me that what he's saying is the truth. Mm-hmm. Really?
Or they don't talk about it.
You know what the truth is, and you deliberately choose lies. You know where the light is, and you deliberately choose the darkness. You do it deliberately because you know, and I know, 63 federal judges said there was no evidence of any fraudulent behavior, any widespread voter fraud in 2020. The United States Supreme Court, time and again, refused to listen to these because there was nothing there. The one time they did in a Pennsylvania case, the most conservative justices said, you know what, even if we responded to this case, it wouldn't change the outcome of the election. You had Republican officials in Michigan, Republican officials in Pennsylvania, Republican officials in Georgia, Republican officials in Arizona repeatedly say that their elections were fair, and yet the lies continue.
Which leads us to question 5. 63 courts, numerous members of your administration, and studies you personally commissioned have all found that the 2020 election was fair. Why do you continue to promote the lie that it was not? And there you go. That's the basic question. That's one of the most important questions. And he really needs to be asked, and he really needs to answer. So let's move on to another question about the cabinet, his cabinet.
Trump's Defense Secretary Mark Esper called Donald Trump a threat to democracy. John Kelly, his longest-serving chief of staff, said Donald Trump had nothing but contempt for our democratic institutions, the Constitution, and the rule of law. Even Bill Barr called Donald Trump a constant narcissist. Donald Trump's own vice president said, the American people deserve to know that President Trump asked me to put him over my oath to the Constitution of the United States. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be the President of the United States. His first Secretary of Defense, James Mad Dog Mattis. Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people. He tries to divide the American people. His chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, retired General Mark Milley, said, we do not take an oath to a want-to-be dictator. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that is America, and we're willing to die for it. Nikki Haley, who at one time, not now, but at one time, said a terrible thing happened on January the 6th, and he called it a beautiful day. Chris Christie said he was just out for himself. His second national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, said we saw the absence of leadership and what that can do to our country. John Bolton, another national security advisor, said foreign leaders think he is a laughing fool.
Question 4. 40 of the 44 officials you carefully selected refused to endorse you in this race. Why should voters listen to you rather than the 91% of your cabinet who know you best? Yep. It's a very simple question. And what's his answer? He's supposed to hire the best. All right, on to this.
And the radical liberals force anarchy on the American people while they live in safety, in many cases behind walls. You know that? Nancy Pelosi has a big wall wrapped around her house. Of course, it didn't help too much with the problem she had, did it? But she had a big wall wrapped around her house.
On to question number 3. Just this week, you once again made fun of the attack on Paul Pelosi, a man in his 80s, an attack that nearly killed him and was perpetrated by one of your supporters. What, Mr. Trump, do you find so funny about attempted murder? What more can we say? There's the question. Big question. Now on to immigration.
Bob, were you able to hear all of Trump's soundbite? I can read you the verbatim.
Yeah, just read it for me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Trump said, we are going to start the largest mass deportation in the history of our country because we have no choice. It's not sustainable. And we are going to start with violent criminals. And we're going to start then with criminals. And our local police is going to work with us because they know everything about the people. They know their names. They know everything about them. Bob, how realistic is his call for mass deportation? Do we even know how he would carry this out? Would it even be constitutional?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand, I think that this is the one thing that he is being very clear about, that all the people who work for him are being very clear about, that they really do intend to carry out. And I think anybody who doesn't believe it really, is just refusing to accept reality. And of course, it's going to be a horrific activity because what's going to happen, by the way, which is already happening to some extent on the border, is you're going to have a lot of people stopping people who look like maybe they're not legal immigrants, and we're going to be living in a society where you have to show people your papers. Obviously, immigration causes some practical problems for people, but this is not about those practical problems for Trump and Vance. This is about poisoning the blood. And I think we need to understand, and Americans in general need to understand, how much of this is basically a white nationalist project, which is masquerading as an anti-immigration movement. But I don't think there's any question that there's no way to carry out this deportation at that massive level. It may not be possible to do it, but even the effort to do it is going to be a horrific violation. It's going to include horrific violations of people's individual rights.
Question number 2. You've called for a mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. Who will handle this? There aren't enough ICE officers, local police are not required to enforce immigration law, and you don't have the authority over them anyway, and it's against the law for U.S. troops to operate within the United States. And this is something he is going to try to do, but people have to know just how difficult and illegal much of this is. Let's move on to tariffs.
And the final question, Resma, is to you.
Thank you. President Trump, you talked about how the increase in the price of food, gas, and rent is hurting families. But the real cost that's breaking families' backs and preventing women from participating in the workforce is childcare. Childcare is now more expensive than rent.
This
for
will
working
initially
families, and
seem
is
like a
costing
question
the
about
economy
childcare,
more
but
than
he tries to
$122 billion
force
a
tariffs
year,
into here.
making
Just
it
watch.
one of the most urgent economic issues that is facing our country. In fact, the cost of childcare is outpacing the cost of inflation, with the majority of American families of young children spending more than 20% of their income on childcare. One thing that Democrats and Republicans have in common is that both parties talk a lot about what they're going to do to address the childcare crisis, but neither party has delivered meaningful change. If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. You know, I was we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country. Because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be getting
He told us about no plan.
And as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people.
All right, enough of that. Question number 1. You claim you want to put 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports. Please explain what tariffs are and who ultimately pays for them. Yeah, because as you watch that previous answer, he clearly knows nothing about tariffs. And we look forward to you watching the debate tonight, and we will return tomorrow with some reaction and see if those questions got answered. And meanwhile, why not you watch that video in the lower left-hand corner? It's a good one. Watch it. Come on, watch it. Watch it.